Welcome to Proof of PR, your passport to the world of public relations for Bitcoin and Web3. I'm your host, Kelley Weaver, CEO of Melrose PR, a leading provider of communications and PR strategy in our unique industry. Get ready for an inside look into the future of finance, technology, and entrepreneurship from those driving innovation in the space. Join us as we learn how they generate headlines, cut through the noise, and grow their brand awareness through media placements, press mentions, and thought leadership. These are the stories behind their success. This is Proof of PR. Hi, everyone. Today, I am super excited to be joined here by Josh Weiss, the president and founder of 10-to-1 Public Relations. Welcome, Josh.
Hi, Kelley. Good to see you.
So I'm excited to dive into your story. We've connected recently, and I've been super impressed. Tell me a little bit about your journey to PR and founding 10-to-1 PR. How did you decide what sectors that you'd represent?
I'm a big believer that when you figure out what you're good at, just do that, right? Be as focused as appropriate as much as you can. So my background is kind of varied in terms of how I ended up getting to PR and all that. I was doing a lot of public safety centered, public-private partnership related PR and before starting my own firm. And originally I thought that I was only going to do that moving forward. I was going to just focus on the public safety sector, ambulance companies, fire departments, law enforcement, and kind of do PR from that perspective, but quickly learned that the strategies that we have fit really well for any B2B company. And we're not afraid to get into those kind of details and really dig a little bit deeper. And I didn't have as much fun doing consumer-centered PR. There's a lot of great things about it, don't get me wrong, but it made it really easy for us to focus on B2B, B2G, and then service-oriented B2C, but we avoid things like restaurants and bars and celebrities. We avoid them like food poisoning. We just don't want to go anywhere near them. There's some really great companies that love that work, and we don't. And so it's really easy to just, focus on what you feel really confident about. And if you can do that, you can really scale and really grow. That
resonates with me a lot because we initially didn't have a focus either and dabbled with restaurants and things like that. And then ultimately we're looking for a niche and then found one. So tell me about what 10-to-1 specializes in now.
10-to-1 Public Relations is a traditional PR firm. And that's part of that focus. I'm really proud of the fact that we're all about earned media, right? So our goal is to generate as many stories for our clients as possible. It's earned media, it's thought leadership such as award nominations and speaker submissions. We do a lot of crisis communications, media training. But essentially for us, if you have to buy it, we don't do it. Even social media, we're very basic social media, and we only do it for those companies that frankly don't have anyone else and they just need to own their channels, but we're not doing it from an engagement perspective at all. And so it's a weird thing to kind of focus on. A lot of people ask us to offer other services or to do a lot more. And from what I found is the fact that we're so focused has actually really upped our game, right? We have, we talk about the growth and all that if you want to, but what it's really allowed us to do is it's allowed our caliber of client to really improve. Our strategy is quite different in that way. And the other part is that when it comes to media relations, and I know we wanted to talk about this because you were really interested in that. Our focus is a little bit different even when it comes to media relations. We've got a very different approach, the 10-to-1 approach, right? And I'm happy to explain what that is. But we want to dominate local market and industry media. And we view that as the cornerstone, not necessarily that tier one media. We're still going to get you the tier one. But our approach being so different really relates well to the kind of clients that we're getting, but it also means a lot of our clients are bigger in that they're in multiple markets, or they really like our focus, and it's really helped us grow and really build into a national agency versus just a local one.
Explain the 10-to-1 approach. I know you explained that to me previously.
Yeah, so there's a couple ways to look at it. So I'll explain it a couple different ways. So I apologize because it's a point I really love to get across. So one way to think about it is what's the 10-to-1 rule? And some people have heard of it before. It's the idea that it takes 10 good things to be said about you to equal 1 negative. And so you got to build up your goodwill bank to protect and inoculate your image. So when I worked in public safety and I was, a PIO and working, all these kind of things, in my mind, my strategy was to build up as much goodwill as possible because something bad was going to happen, right? You had to kind of get ahead of it and protect yourself because people are willing to forgive you when they already know who you are. So an easy example, let's say there's a new restaurant that opens in town. And the first thing you hear about this new restaurant is negative. You're never walking in the door, right? You just take it off your list 100%, never, ever going to consider it. But if a bunch of different friends or neighbors say positive things like, oh, I went there, I didn't have to wait for my table. The food was good. I like this. The ambience is nice. My service was fast. And you hear a bunch of small comments. Doesn't mean to be the best restaurant they've ever gone to, just general positive comments. And then somebody says, yeah, I went there. I really didn't like what I ate. I didn't really like it that much. Even if you hear that after hearing enough positive reviews and positive comment, you're still willing to walk in the door, right? It may not be the first thing on your list anymore, but you're still willing to walk in the door. And so having that positive impression first really buys you that confidence and buys you a second chance. People want to forgive you, right? You had a bad day. Okay. But if the first thing they hear about you is negative, they just assume that you're guilty. And so we're really in favor of building as much goodwill as possible, the quick response to the crisis, so it doesn't allow that negative to linger out. So a lot of the work we do is just positive PR, right? That's really what we do. But our focus on building positive PR means that we need to do lots of little stories to protect you versus one big story, right? Because we're going for that 10. And our strategy, and that's where local and industry is so important to us, we want to get as many stories as possible to create this kind of blanket coverage. And it's a very different approach versus many agencies. And a lot of companies think that they want that tier one media. They want to be in Forbes. They want to be in the New York Times. And we'll get you there too. But if that's your focus and that's all you care about, our firm isn't the right one for you.
When you say stories, do you mean mentions, like thought leadership mentions, the executives being quoted in these stories? Or do you mean actual, stories about them?
Yeah, the answer is yes to both. So we want to get as many touches as possible. So sometimes it's just being mentioned in a big story, right? You're one of 5 people mentioned in a broader list type of story, right? Yeah, these 5 experts have this suggestion for you on this topic. We'll absolutely get those. And a lot of times that's where those tier 1 stories come from. I actually think it's the community newspaper stories, and it's the local business stories, and it's most importantly, the industry specific stories. That can really be about you, right? It's much more interesting and much more appropriate. And so, to your audience and who you're really talking to anyway. But if you ask me as a salesperson, like if you're walking in and you're trying to get somebody to, you're trying to close a sale with your customer, what's more impressive to the potential customer? Handing over 10 small stories, the community newspaper, the daily, TV station, the local TV station, the industry magazine that only people in the industry read, even if it's only 30,000 people nationwide. Are you better off handing 10 small stories that are unique stories or one mention in the New York Times? I'll take the 10 stories every time. And so that's why our approach is really a small ball. So if you like baseball, it's an easy way to understand it. Even if you're not a fan, you can kind of get it. We are not trying to hit home runs, right? That is not our strategy. Our strategy is to get base hits. We want to get base hit after base hit after base hit and run up the score. The problem with trying to hit home runs all the time, and I think there's a mistake that several clients have and that they think they need home runs, but I also think it's a mistake for a lot of agencies to think that they should only focus on that too. The problem with home runs is the best home run hitters on the baseball team maybe get 30 home runs a year. That's great. Don't get me wrong. 30 home runs on a baseball team is fantastic, but you're also getting like 600 at bats. You're striking out 150, 200 times. I don't want to strike out at all. I just want to get base hit after base hit after base hit. It may not be as exciting, in terms of a logo on your website that we were on CNN. That granted, one of our clients right now has CNN visiting them in a positive story. But you know what I'm saying, right? So I'd rather get you lots of little stories and really build it up and run up the score. And I think that's a mistake a lot of companies make, especially startups. They think that one story is going to change everything. And sometimes that's possible. But in reality, if you get lots of little stories, you get the community stories and build some community support. You get the industry stories where you kind of get some traction and people understand, and they're your real customers anyway. That's when the mainstream media or the tier one media, the national media, they might be more interested at that point because they see there's something there versus selling them, a bag of beans and they don't know if there's anything really there that'll grow.
I love how you explain it. We call it the snowball strategy. Starting small, and then it grows and grows and grows, and then you have sort of the power to get these bigger pieces. Because as you mentioned, the reporters from these top tier publications are going to want to see a footprint online of some wins. Doing
it over time, PR does not happen overnight. The ROI of PR is so hard to show, right? It's really easy when you're placing an ad. You know if people clicked on it or not. Right? It's you see the numbers. It's a different, you can do it easier A/B testing. The problem with PR, and you get it, I know we've had these conversations, it's so hard because it's like you're literally in a desert and you have to keep watering, the desert and change the soil, right? Before anything is going to grow. And so it literally takes time. But if you can do that in the middle of the desert and get something to grow, the roots are so strong that it's not going to blow over, right? It's going to be really effective and it's going to have that stature and it's going to last. And the ROI long-term is fantastic, but the ROI short-term on PR is really, really hard to show. And, it's one of those things that as an agency owner, it's so hard to explain to people. And that's why we're really selective in what kind of clients we work with. So you got to find the right fit based on your personality and your approach, right? And so, if they don't like that dominating local market and industry approach, they're the wrong fit for us. And that's okay. If they don't understand the benefit of I kind of joke on a cookie cutter perspective. A lot of people think cookie cutters are a bad thing. I don't want a cookie cutter approach to my PR. Totally wrong answer. I disagree with that completely. Cookie cutters give you form and structure, right? They give you the outline and they give you that strength. Now the ingredients have to change and the frosting on the cookie should change, but you want a frame. And so one of the things that we're really successful at and we really like and our clients like is we can take a story and do it in one city. And then the next month we can do it again in the next city. And then we can do it again in the next city after that, right? We're personalizing it to that location. We're giving local examples. We're giving local customers, right? And that way the story is built around the local version of the story. But I rather go city by city by city to introduce the product or the service and really grow it that way where it's really personalized while still doing the nationwide coverage at the same time. You're still putting out the bigger announcements overall. But if you can kind of step by step walk across the country to different markets, you're going to be a lot more effective because you can personalize it. But if you already know it works in Cleveland, it's probably going to work in Indianapolis too. And I'll probably work in Chicago, and I'll probably work in Phoenix, and I'll probably work in San Diego and Seattle and Miami.
So you don't have a specific regional focus. I know your team is based in Arizona entirely, but that's not the only market that you serve regionally.
Yeah, so our clients are all over the country. We have a bunch of international clients too. So it kind of surprised me too, right? I originally thought that I'd probably just be doing PR in Phoenix, which is generally where we're in Scottsdale, which is a suburb arguably of Phoenix. I assumed we would just be focused here. And I have a great media contacts here. But I've always been working with industry media. And I love the local story anywhere, right? With our unique approach and the fact that we're so centered on PR, what we found is our clients ended up wanting us to do the same thing in multiple cities, right? And we kind of started getting bigger clients. And all of a sudden, the bigger clients really liked the fact that we weren't selling other services. Everyone was saying, you got to offer more, you got to offer graphics, you got to do advertising, you got to do different marketing pieces. And I kind of shied away from that. And people thought I was crazy, but it also ended up resulting in, instead of it being just small little local companies hiring us, we were starting to get some $100 million, $250 million, $500 million, $1 billion clients. Because when they're that big, they have different people in charge of different departments. So now the actual VP of communications was calling us to do communications PR work. And she loved the fact that we weren't trying to sell social media to her and we weren't trying to do advertising because that was a different department's responsibility. You usually, PR is usually not the first thing on your list as being the most important item, right? There's other things and services that you can arguably make more money on or that are bigger turnarounds from that regard. And so a lot of times a big agency, might have 100, 200 people working at them, but they're mostly the social media side or the media buying or the advertising, and the marketing aspect of things. And their PR department tends to be really small because it's an add-on service because their clients want PR, but it's not the primary focus of what they are. I've grown my firm over the last 11 years. We now have a dozen people working on our team, full-time, 100% PR only. That means our PR department of 12 people is often larger than large agencies that have 100, 200 employees because we actually have more PR-centered focused people than they do. And so, based on our billings, it may not look super impressive to big agencies, but if they looked at it based on a department perspective, they're kind of impressed with what we've been able to do by just having this single focus. And it's scalable, right? I mean, granted, a small company is not going to be interested because they may want that full service of everything. But to, those $100 million, companies or organizations, they're much more excited to know that we're really going to focus on one piece and do it really, really well.
Yeah, that's an interesting framing. It's the same for us. Like our businesses are similar in that sense of the only earned media PR. But I hadn't thought about it that way.
What's one of the things I love about your firm is that you're really focused on your industries and you really understand them. You know the reporters. You can get those stories because you've got that focal point, and you're not afraid to say no to other things when they don't fit cleanly. Now, it doesn't mean they have to be 100% fit. But if they aren't on your focal point, it's just not a good fit.
Well, it makes it so much easier for us because it's like rinse and repeat. We're working with the same reporters every time. So it matters a lot what types of clients we work with because we care a lot about the relationships that we have because we're leveraging them often. So it makes the client selection process easier. And then I also agree with your point about the expectations going into it. If you explain what the goals are and that doesn't necessarily resonate with a potential client, then you know that it's not going to be a great fit long term. So,
and there we go. It's really easy in a way to figure out who you think could be a good partner. The other part that's harder is, are they a jerk or not? Right? Sometimes you can get a feel for, are they a jerk when you're talking to them, and just their the way they talk, you can tell that it's just personality wise, it's not going to be a fit. But I don't know if you've had this occasion too, and it's very rare that we've had it. It's even on our website. We have something we call the no jerks policy. And so we have a no jerks policy at 10-1 PR. And that refers to our own employees with each other, right? We're not going to be jerks to each other. We're going to support each other and, say hello in the morning. And, we're going to work as a team. And, there's no jerks on our staff. But that's a requirement of our clients too. And there have been times where we fired clients because they were just abusive or they were unrealistic, and they initially implied that they understood our approach and that they weren't going to yell and berate our team. It's that kind of example. Yeah, we know what we're good at. We'll adapt, and we understand we got to match our services to what the client needs and get them results that are unique. But we still have a general way that we're going to do things in our approach. And if that person's just going to be a jerk to us, it's not worth it. Right? So it's like that 90-10 rule, right? You spend 90% of your time on the 10% of the problem. Those problem people. And let's just get rid of problems. Like let's
we've done that too.
And get results and deal with hard issues.
Well, a lot of the time it boils down to expectations. And are their expectations realistic? Because sometimes the personalities come out when they feel like their expectations are not being met. And so really making sure going into the engagement that expectations are in check is so important.
We tell them straight out, if all you care about is tier one media, do not hire us. And when you start a meeting like that, it weeds people out really quick sometimes. And the people who are like, want to end the call, great. You saved us both some time by just not engaging. If you can understand what our approach is, and you can appreciate it and see the benefit, that's when there's the potential for a fit. So it's just that initial conversation to make sure that you're aligned on approach and philosophy and strategy. That doesn't mean every client takes the strategy recommendations we give them. That's not what it's about. It's not them having to do it our way, because we got to adapt to them. I know that you do that as well. But the core has to be aligned, and we have to be walking the same direction. And yes, it's just not worth it. to try and walk in different directions and still get to the same place.
I know you love working in crisis communications. What gets you so excited about the crisis work?
I don't wish for a crisis. Let's be really clear. So, but I like to be prepared for it. And part of that comes back to what I did earlier in my career. I worked in politics. I did the public safety side. So if you think about it, like from an ambulance company perspective, if you're driving a million miles, a year, to driving the, emergencies and that kind of stuff, there's going to be a time where a crash happens, right? There's going to be a time where there's a bad outcome. There's going to be a time where the ambulance goes to the wrong address. There's going to be all those scenarios where hundreds and thousands of times it works correctly, but that mistake is still going to happen. Yes, it's thinking quick on your feet. Yeah, it's, responding respectfully and taking responsibility. But I find that I don't skirt from those things. And so when they happened, I felt like I did my best work. I contributed the most to the team when that crisis happened by leading my team or leading the client or leading my company. How do we handle this scenario, right? I mean, in the public safety realm, that's like a line of duty death. Horrible thing. And it's the worst professional week of your life when that happens, right? To deal with that and handle all the media inquiries and what do you do? But when you kind of learn how to handle that, because all crises, there's still a playbook, right? And the playbook doesn't change for the most part. There's still a consistency of what a company needs to do when a crisis happens, right? And what you say changes, but the core of it doesn't. And so once you have the confidence and you understand those lines and you see the big picture and you understand that you can't tell people they're wrong to be angry, right? And you can't lie to them, but you have to respond quickly, professionally, and appropriately. Once you understand there's certain rules that you still have to follow, it's not that hard. And so when it comes to crisis communications, the reason why I think I like it is that it's not that I finally get people to listen to me and do what I want them to do, which is almost like kind of the joke during a crisis. And I kind of joke about it with people before they hire us. I'm like, in the crisis, I am going to tell you what to do. I am going to walk you through it. You make the final decision, but I'm going to give you advice and then we're going to move forward. During a crisis, people are scared and they should be. You got the leaders of the company that are afraid for the company. You've got the employees who are afraid for their job. You've got the customer or the patient or whoever it is who's afraid for what does this mean to me and what is the effect on me. You've got a lot of different audiences, but everybody's looking for somebody to give them an answer on what to do. And so I'm not afraid during that crisis to give a piece of advice and to direct people like, this is what you need to do. You need to do it right now. This is not, let me think about it an hour. You've got 5 minutes. People really respond to somebody taking charge because somebody has to, and they need to feel confident in that response. So during that crisis as a leader, if you're ever in charge of that scenario where you need to talk to somebody, you need to come in and be really confident, and you need to display that confidence to the executives or the leaders. Like, here's what we need to do. Let me go do it. Okay. Instead of like, should I do this or should I do that? No, during a crisis, there shouldn't be questions about what I should do. You need to be very direct in giving instructions to other people because they're really happy when someone tells them what to do during a crisis, right? So even if there's a crash on the side of the road and people stop, right? It's just great that they're stopping because they're willing to help. So that's a good thing. There's always that one person who says, you call 911, you come over here and hold their hand, you do this, you do that. Somebody takes charge of the scene. And when you're leading a crisis, you need to do that. I don't want to say that that's my personality and I handle crises really well and I kind of take action and I'm not afraid to give a recommendation because it doesn't even matter if you're correct in what you're recommending sometimes. It's just that you're moving forward and everybody's walking with you because action sometimes is more important than inaction.
A lot of the work is front loaded. Like you've ran the scenarios ahead of time. Therefore, it's like, okay, we talked about this.
We did. So I probably showed you this too. I keep this on my desk. Do you remember Mad Libs when you were a kid?
Of course.
Of course. So I believe that every company should have their version of Mad Libs, right? They should have their crisis emergency playbook. There are certain generic scenarios that are going to happen to any company. So if you've got a fleet of vehicles, there's a high likelihood at some point there's going to be a crash. And it's got your name on the side of the vehicle, right? Your literal moving billboard of your company name is going to be shown if the vehicle overturned or, God forbid, one of your staff was drunk driving and strikes and kills somebody, right? You're going to be in a scenario like that. Every company should have their playbook of what am I going to do when this happens? Because it's going to. And so all you got to do is fill in the blank later, right? Like, if there's that crash or someone dies or your employee dies or they're responsible for, God forbid, killing somebody else in an accident, you can have your answer pre-approved by the executives, by the legal department. Here's what we're going to do if there's a crash in one of our vehicles. And you fill in the blank later, just like Mad Libs, putting in the name, the date, the location, the detail. You do that later, right? During the immediate crisis, it's a race to respond appropriately to buy yourself more time. It's one of those crisis things. And if you can acknowledge it, you don't have to have a solution. You just have to acknowledge it quickly. Now, if you're guilty, you want to take it, you want to admit that right away, right? I mean, crow tastes better warm than cold. So if you're going to, apologize eventually, better to do it immediately, right? If they're going to have to forgive you, the faster you do it, the fewer news cycles you get it done in, of course, do that. The other side is don't say more than you need to the first, several hours of a crisis because you don't know enough usually. So a big mistake that companies do is they put their executive out in front and say, yeah, we believe that 1,000 people were affected by the security breach and the cyber attack. And, we're working on it. You get the number wrong. It looks like you as a CEO, you find that out 4 hours later. It looks like you didn't understand how big a problem it is. If it was only 10 people, you just said it was more than that. So again, you hurt yourself. So instead, the holding statement should be really clear, very direct, like we're aware of the breach, we're analyzing, its effects right now. Our priority is making sure that, we protect the people who are affected and we will take care of them and making sure that this doesn't happen again. That doesn't really say anything, but it says really important things. It says that you're aware, it says that you're taking responsibility, you're going to make sure it doesn't happen again, and you're going to take care of the people who are most affected by this negative thing.
Yeah, great tips. Really good points. I know you've been outspoken about why companies should be scared about deep fakes. Can you tell me more about your work there?
Yeah, I just find this so fascinating. So I do not pretend in any way to be an expert on AI. And that's a whole interesting conversation about how it's going to change the world and how PR firms should be using it. And that's a separate conversation, which I don't feel like I'm necessarily an expert on, but I can always share my opinion on anything. When it comes to deepfakes, I accidentally kind of became an expert on the topic. And so I remember it was about a year ago, I was at an event and I was talking with some other owners of agencies and we were talking about AI and how it's going to affect their agencies and their clients and all this kind of stuff. And somebody said that they're not afraid of like ChatGPT and AI in general, because we're going to figure out how to use it the right way and we're going to, adjust it. And, job responsibilities may change as a result, but, we're going to figure that out and it's not going to, end industries. It's just going to alter them. But somebody made the comment they were afraid of deepfakes because it's going to be so easy to attack other people. And they may have been referring to it as, from an elections or celebrities. But since I do a lot of crisis work, right, I immediately went to, oh my God, this is actually a really big threat. So what happens, for example, that if somebody did any big publicly traded company and somebody were to do a deepfake video of the CEO saying that the product is delayed, that that's supposed to be coming out, or that they're even announcing a new product that doesn't really exist. If this video that looks like and sounds like in any way, the background is correct, it really appears like the CEO is saying this, even if a week later or a couple days later it comes out that that was a fake video, how easy would it be to short the stock? Someone to manipulate the stock price in order to make millions and millions of dollars. It's really, really easy.
Do you work with a lot of publicly traded companies, by the way?
We don't do investor relations directly. We're more focused on, most of our companies are private. Some of them are publicly traded. We don't do any of the investor relations related work, but all the different aspects of crises. So it doesn't have to be like that stock specific example. It could just be even an RFP. Let's say two companies are up for an RFP. You're finalists. Well, what if the competitor realizes they might lose to you, so they create a deepfake audio in where it sounds like your CEO is talking to another employee saying, "Yeah, we put all this stuff in the bid, but we know we can't do it. We don't have the ability to do any of that. But we'll figure it out after we win the contract." And that audio gets out there. Well, even if the judging panel, right, for the RFP doesn't know if it's real or not, they still have to make a decision on a set date. they're not going to alter the date that the answer is due because they have a schedule to meet. So are you going to risk hiring a company that might be openly saying that they can't do the work? Or are you going to choose the other company where you haven't heard anything negative, good or bad, right? They're a finalist. They were good enough to make it to that level of the list. Which company are you going to choose? There's so many potential risks. So when I started thinking about this, I started looking, all right, I got to build out my playbook. I need to do my Mad Libs for clients. And what am I going to do when this happens? And I started looking online. This is almost a year ago now. I started looking online for what are other agencies doing, what are the agency norms, what's the experts suggesting. There was nothing out there. There was no conversation. So now I started calling all these global companies that's supposed to be doing deepfake detection services and all that kind of stuff. There were a lot less companies than I thought, right? And so I'm talking to them, I'm learning more. A lot of them are building their platforms for governments or for educational institutions or for enterprise companies like insurance companies. They're looking for fraudulent, claims, those kind of things. There weren't a lot of solutions for normal companies, right? If they were to be attacked. And so I started building a playbook and I started doing all this stuff and nothing was out there. And I started running even some ads because I built a page with download this guide, you need to prepare. And I believe that if a company, and this is where the playbook changes for the first time, right? 80% of your emergency playbook, your crisis playbook is the same. You still need to do those core things about responding quickly and all that kind of stuff. The biggest problem, though, is if your company's under a threat of a deepfake attack, you can't just say it's not real because they just saw a video of you doing something that looks really real, right? They don't know if you're telling the truth or just trying to cover yourself. You now need a third party to say, yeah, this is fake and here's why. This isn't a real video, don't believe it. And so now you need a third-party credibility source, an expert, to be able to say that, whether that be a software program that can, show it's fake, whether it be an expert who can point out that, you can tell because of this and that, that this isn't real anymore and all that kind of stuff. It's gotten a lot harder. And so companies just really need to prepare for it. Right now, it's going after politicians. We're already seeing some of those stories, right? And it's going to see more of it during the presidential election, this election cycle. You already saw a little bit with celebrities. Yeah, if you don't know what I'm talking about, look up Pope in the puffy coat on Google, and you'll laugh about that, right? There's a lot of little things that you can, see that are happening. I'm predicting that as the election comes to a close at the end of the year in the fall, you're going to start seeing some companies start getting attacked using the same tactics that you saw against the politicians. And I think that in 2025, we're going to see a lot of it. But I think that at a certain point in 2025, no one's going to believe anything they see anymore. They're going to think everything is a fake video, or the Metas and the Googles are going to have to come up with some way to identify those more directly within their platforms to remove them. But it's going to be a big short-term problem because everyone at first is going to believe the deep fake until they reach a point of saturation where they don't believe anything they see anymore. And that's scary for a lot of different reasons.
It is scary because especially when you look at these and how realistic they are, you definitely can kind of go down a rabbit hole of like what could end up happening with that. So you mentioned that your team is good at work. I know at like small wins, and part of that you mentioned is awards and event submissions. Tell me more about that and why it matters for companies and the strategy there.
Yeah. So if you're thinking about from the media side, the reason you're trying to get these positive stories, these small stories, like, even just new hire announcements and all those kind of small little things, is it just builds steps of credibility, right? Like drips out of a faucet, you're collecting water. It's just a drip. But if you collect enough of them, you've got real water to drink or to do something with or to plant, right? And so you want as many small stories as you can because it gives you credibility. That's the media relations side. But why would it be any different when it comes to awards or speaker submissions? If you're trying to position yourself as an expert and trying to show your credibility, what better credibility is there somebody else, a third party, saying you're worthy of an award? It's a great opportunity for a company to demonstrate that they're a leader and that they're legitimate.
Some of these have like small fees attached, and you suggest paying those types of fees, right? It's like $100, $200, because you mentioned it's only
different levels, right? So some of them are maybe $300, $400 for some of those award submissions. And sometimes there's a discount if you submit multiple, right, in different categories. Sometimes there's a bunch of free awards. So for example, whatever city you're in, there's probably a weekly business paper, right? American Business Journals has 30 different ones across the country, I think. It's like bizjournals.com, bizjournals.com. You can look it up and see what's in your town. Or Crane's Business. They operate in multiple different cities. A lot of those magazines, they're going to post for the local market an award competition on a lot of different topics, whether it be, community involvement or whether it be industry, individual leader or CEO awards or whatever the case is. Those usually don't cost anything. Absolutely take advantage of them. Do the Chamber of Commerce Awards, right? Absolutely. Those are great opportunities. And some of the forms are really easy to complete. And some of them are really hard. But a lot of times there are free opportunities. There's a bunch of online digital awards or, you submit it online and you can go to their awards event. But, a lot of times you would buy a trophy after you win kind of thing. Those are beneficial too if you have someone to put them in your office or if you're going to put out a press release saying that you won that award or you're going to, again, it's credibility to demonstrate that you're strong. So I literally over my shoulder have an award here, and that was from the Better Business Bureau. Right? That is a really hard award to win for ethical companies, right? And we're really proud of it that we won that. It's a harder award to get. It didn't cost us any money to submit. And we regularly submit our clients for that. And it's a long process for that. Where other things, let's say like the Inc. 5000, which we've been on as well, the Inc. 5000 award is actually pretty simple, right? It's really a matter of numbers. Where do you rank based on growth? And you need to have a CPA confirm, that you're not making up your numbers. But it's a really simple form because it's literally a list. That one you got to pay for. And so it's just a credibility point. And so don't dismiss them. I often, if a nomination is like $700, I usually won't do that one. If it's under $500, I often will recommend it. Some of the awards are not worth that much, but they look really nice sitting on a bookshelf. That's okay, right? But that doesn't mean don't do the hard ones too, because that's where you really learn who you are and that's where you really improve. The ethics award through the Better Business Bureau for us was a fantastic experience. One, because it meant something and it was hard to get. It demonstrated that we're an ethical company, that we treat our customers right and we do what's right for them. But it's a really, really hard nomination. And you got to answer all those questions. You got to really boil down what's your culture and how do you handle different scenarios. And sometimes just reflecting on that and being able to note it and mark it down really can help your business grow regardless of if you win the award or not. And so if you're willing to really put yourself into that process, it could be really rewarding. And it can really make you a stronger company.
We're wrapping things up here, but I did want to ask this question about what your experience has been like working with reporters and what are sort of the best practices for breaking into new publications? Because you mentioned like your strategy is sort of rinse and repeat across across regions. Therefore, I imagine you're constantly forging new relationships across new reporters. And so what are any tips you might have for cultivating new reporter relationships?
Yeah, great question. I think the most important thing is you can never lie to them, ever. No exceptions. Now That's quite basic. It's pretty basic, but if you get burnt, you're burnt through the whole organization, right? They are going to tell all their friends they're never going to work with you again. Don't ever burn a reporter. The other part is, to build that relationship. When you say you're going to call them back by a certain time, call them an hour before that time, right? When you say you're going to get them an interview, get them the interview. If your client backs out, which happens sometimes, offer them an alternative, right? Be honest and direct as early as you can. Don't wait till their deadline because they still have to write their story and be done. So as weird as it sounds, you got to respect reporters, even when you don't know who they are beforehand. And so part of it is just treat them with the same respect you would expect back. And that comes through. When you're picking the reporter to go to and all that kind of stuff, I think that what you need to do is you need to look and see what they've written before and the type of things they've written. You need to make sure you're sending the release or the pitch to the right person. And I mean by that is like, why would you send a political story to a sports reporter, right? I mean, try and be very narrow on the beat. I mean, it sounds really silly, but if you don't waste their time, that helps. The other part is to remember that one email isn't going to be enough. That doesn't mean you bombard them and annoy them. It means you got to build a relationship, even if you've never talked to them before. And that could just be through email. Of them seeing your pitches on a regular basis, where your name becomes familiar to them on their email thread, or they say, if you think about it, a reporter, since there are so fewer reporters today than there were before, and they're expected to do so many more stories, especially on a local level, they have 100 pitches a day. 50 of them are totally inappropriate, right? The sports reporter getting the political, that kind of thing. But 50 of this 100 stories they get are legitimate to the right person. Maybe it's a story, maybe it's not. The thing is, they only get to write 1 or 2 stories a day. So that means 48 or 49 of those pitches, even if they're technically appropriate, get ignored. So what we want to do is the same way dripping the public, right? We want those 10 touches to the public to negate that one negative that they might hear down the road. It's the same thing when we're reaching out to reporters to build that relationship, that we might need to send them every month or every regular cadence a new pitch or a new press release and touch them. It's got to still be appropriate to them. But all of a sudden, after 6 months, even if they'd never responded and taken us up on a story, that wasn't a waste of time. Because now when their editor says to the reporter, I need a story about this topic, the reporter's like, great, I don't even know who to talk to. I don't know anything about that. But you know what? I keep getting these emails from Josh and his team where they have an expert who can explain this to me. Let me just have them get on a call with me. They can explain what this is. Well, now you're the expert, your client's the expert, explaining a complicated issue. That's the best possible scenario. But the only reason you even had that opportunity is because you consistently reached out to them professionally, making it known that you're available if you need this topic, or here's an angle if you're looking for a story for today. Friend building is a long process. It's a repetitive process. It's a consistent process. That's part one about how do you start building a relationship. The other is that you just need to give them a good story, right? A reporter is going to work with you the first time if your story angle is just that good, right? You got to understand what they need, what their audience needs. And if you can tell them and personalize that pitch to them, they're going to write it if it's a good story. Because even if you have a great relationship, even if you're, best friends with the reporter, if the story is not good, they're going to choose the better story because that's their job, right? The relationship only matters if there's 2 equal stories side by side, and they got to choose which one they're going to write that day. And they know you, and they know you're going to deliver on your promises of interviews and connections and resources, and you're going to be on time. And the other person they'd never heard of before, yeah, that's when having a relationship pays off because you're more likely to get that story, right? You were talking about how you love that you work with the same reporters all the time. They trust you because if it's not a good story, you're not going to give it to them, or you're going to be honest with them, right? Professionally so, and not to the point where you're hurting your client, because they'll respect the client. The fact that you're saying, look, I've got this. It's not a front page story, but it's worth a mention.
Well, a lot of the time we're letting our clients down when they come to us and say, we got this great story. And we're like, honestly, that's, not very newsworthy, and we're not going to pitch it. We're going to be strategic about where we can be realistically shopping that type of story because it matters to maybe your community, but not to the press, or, there's sort of an expectation setting process there.
And sometimes you can tweak it, right? So maybe they've got a core story that's not a good one, but there's an element of it that is interesting. And so now that minor element in their mind becomes the lead excuse to push a story or pitch something unique. And that gets you in the rabbit hole, right? That gets you under the tent enough where they're going to mention the bigger story that the client thinks is bigger. But it's really that tiny little piece that's really the only reason the reporter was interested in the first place. So it's our job as professionals to acknowledge when that happens, but to educate our clients that that's just not, no one's going to care about that. That's a sales piece. They're not there to market for you, right? PR is, if you want an advertisement in the newspaper, then buy an advertisement. PR is about building that reputation, that genuine story. And it's hard for some people to realize that we're not just placing exactly what they want. And no, the client cannot review the story before it runs. It's one of those kind of things that you got to trust the reporter, but you got to give them enough information where they can write a good story, which means they got to have something worthy.
Well, Josh, thank you so much for coming on the show today. You've given us so many tactical, amazing tips. I've even learned some things. So thank you so much for joining us and sharing your wisdom.
Well, I appreciate it. I've really gotten to know you a little bit over the last several weeks. I'm so impressed by you. I've known who Melrose was before that, and I knew that it was a strong, excellent firm, really focused in getting results. But just getting to know you a little bit and have some nice conversations, and yeah, you're a pro. So I really appreciate you as well. So thank you.
Thanks for tuning in to Proof of PR. This episode was brought to you by Melrose PR, the leading provider of communications and PR strategy for Bitcoin and Web3 innovators. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe, rate, and review us wherever you listen today. To stay up to date on upcoming guests and news, visit proofofpr.com or follow us on Twitter @proofofpr. Until next time, keep learning, innovating, and hodling.